Welcome to the Blooming League of Original Podcasts.
Hello and welcome to Talk Musicals to Me, a new theatre podcast about musicals and their impact on people. My name is Caroline Sheen and I'm here to quiz some of the leading creatives in the entertainment industry about their relationship with musical theatre and how certain musicals may have influenced their lives in ways you may not even expect. From how they first encountered a musical to musicals they may never even have seen, let's dive in and introduce today's guest to open up and talk musicals to me. Our guest today is the lovely Anthony Drewe, best known for his collaborations with George Stiles. Anthony is a lyricist and occasionally a book writer, and he has been part of some of the most fabulous British-born musicals that we have. We have Just So, Honk, Mary Poppins, which was a collaboration with the Sherman Brothers, Betty Blue Eyes, Half a Sixpence, Wind in the Willows, Becoming Nancy, Identical. George and Ant together are a formidable team in musical theatre in Britain, and we love them for it. And they are basically propping up the musical theatre industry over here with their mentorship and their care of other writers as well. They are both absolutely brilliant. Anthony, it's an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast today. Welcome.
Thank you. Lovely to see you, Caroline.
It's an absolute treat to talk to you. You're in France and it looks fabulous over there.
Yes, I've been down here for a couple of weeks. Really, I normally come down for about 6 months a year, but I like to come down around February, March, partly because I like to check the house is okay, because I haven't been here since October, and partly because it's the beginning of the cowslips coming out, the daffodils, the cranes migrating north from Morocco and southern Spain. I heard my first chiff chaff yesterday. I think by the time I come back to London, I will have missed the first cuckoo, but it's a lovely time of year to see the world waking up again.
Now, I love this about you, Ants, because you are a nature guy, aren't you? That's what you studied, right, in university? Zoology, am I right?
That's right. I studied zoology and ecology at university, and I was interested in natural history from a very, very young age because the wife of my local doctor in Coxheath in Kent, which is where I was brought up, who was strangely called Mrs. Bird, ran the largest young ornithologists club in the country, and I became a member at a very young age. Along with my brother and two sisters, we used to go out with Anne Bird and the group at weekends to identify birds primarily. But as the group grew, it had the butterfly bunch and it had the small mammals group, and there was a camera club. It suddenly became all embodying all aspects of British natural history, to the extent that when I was about 16, I founded, with a wonderful lady called Jeannie Dunkinson, a group called the Mowglies, aimed at 5, 6 and 7-year-olds. And once a month, we would take 5, 6 and 7-year-olds out and we would show them big things. You know, there's no saying there's a great crested whatever, you know. We would take them to see swans and ducks, trees and flowers, and we could set Longworth traps which catch small mammals live so they could see a shrew or a field mouse. It was a great deal of fun, and I loved being able to know things. I always say this to my nephews when we go for a walk: how can you possibly walk past that tree and not want to know what it's called? And I do, because it's part of my upbringing.
And I love that, and you've worked that into your work. I think especially Wind in the Willows and Just So, gosh, actually no, a lot of it is Just So, Honk. It's all part of that love of nature that you have, that you bring to the stage. And I think that's quite an unusual thing. It's not something people expect to see when you go to a musical. You don't expect to have this come out feeling like the world is a wonderful place full of natural beauty and trees and birds and newts and things like that.
It's funny because it wasn't intentional. And the first show George and I wrote together was not based on animals in any way, but Just So, which was our second show, obviously was. It was the Just So stories by Rudyard Kipling. And we got to a point when George said to me, please, no more animal shows. With something like Honk, everything in Honk is biologically correct. So Greylag, the goose who runs the sort of squadron, there's a Greylag, and there's Barnacle, Snowy and Pinkfoot, where they're all different species of geese, but that's their names in the show. The female swan who the ugly duckling befriends is called Penny, because a female swan is called a pen and a male is called a cob. The cat in Act 2 is Queenie, because a female cat is a queen. So I knew that everything was biologically correct in the show. Not that it needed to be, but it actually is, which pleases me.
I think that's fantastic. And I feel like the same about Six, actually, because I'm a bit of a Tudor history geek. And when I first heard the music, when I first saw the show of Six, I was like, this is great. But also, it's factually correct as well. All the stuff the wives sing about are things that absolutely happened. And I think that's what's fun, isn't it, about telling stories and bringing a story to somebody, is actually making what we have here appeal to many people, and to tell people about these things. And why not have them be totally real? Because that's what we'll invest in the most, is real things and the truth.
I think so generally. I think you don't want to go to the theatre and think you've gone to school to have a lesson. You want to be entertained. But I think if within that entertainment there are facts being imparted, you want them to be correct.
Yeah.
I was in a pub quiz not so long ago when I was back home in Kent, and I was in this pub quiz and there was a question about the six queens, and I knew it, not because I knew it, but because I knew the score of six.
Musical theatre, one of my questions is, it should be on the national curriculum, because you learn about so many other things through the medium of musical theatre. It's brilliant. I love it. Can I start asking you some of my questions, Anthony Drewe? Thank you very much. My first question is, how did you meet musical theatre?
I come from a very musical family, which I have to say I'm the least musical, but my siblings are all very musical. They did up to grade 8 violin, cello, piano. I couldn't. I had a crack at piano and gave up. I had a crack at the oboe, which I did play until it got to grade 5, when you then have to do a theory exam. I thought, no, that's me done. But I did enjoy playing Sousa marches and things in the school band. But my parents, despite the fact they were both scientists, used to take us to the theatre a lot. And so I suppose my first meeting of a musical in London was Billy at Drury Lane, with a Michael Crawford and a very young Elaine Page and a very young Gay Soper in the cast. And it was based on Billy Liar by Keith Waterhouse and Willis Hall, who I later had the pleasure of working with and befriending when I worked on the card. And Willis, particularly until he died, he used to ring me every single day. He became a great friend of mine. So Billy was the first big musical I saw. But prior to that, what my parents had done had taken us to the Hazlitt Theatre in Maidstone, which is our local, to see things like The White Horse Inn, Fiddler on the Roof. First time I ever saw that was an amateur production in Maidstone, and some Gilbert and Sullivan productions, which I think my brother was probably leading the orchestra for. So I say, despite the fact they were both scientists, they wanted us to have a very broad artsy grounding as well as science. I mean, it was great having a mum who was a maths teacher for the homework, but it was something that we all learned as a family. In fact, we were known as that noisy family. When I used to learn to packing apples in the packing houses in Kent, there was a lady who lived down our road, and she said, "Oh, you're from that noisy family." And she meant the music. There was always music coming out the windows. So yeah, I think Billy was the first big one, starring Michael Crawford.
And that was quite a big deal, right, Billy? And had he already done Some Others Do Have 'Em at that point?
I think he'd done the film of Hello Dolly, and he'd done Some Others Do Have 'Em. He was a real household name.
It was at Drury Lane. It had this iconic cast that obviously went on to like massive things. It's never really had a revival, has it? What do you remember about it?
What I remember about it is a song called Ambrosia. And for me, that was tinned rice. It wasn't the food of the gods. I remember the song Some of Us Belong to the Stars. I remember the song about any minute now, that git will show up, any minute now. In fact, when George and I were on the Elaine Page show, they said, could we give them our top 10 favourite musicals? And they said, oh, P.S., it would be a good idea if Elaine was in one of them. And I said, well, this is brilliant, because I can just say the first musical I ever went to. And they played that song. Yeah, Some of Us Belong to the Stars, I really remembered. It's Don Black lyrics and music by John Barry. I did see a revival not so long ago at the Union Theatre, the old Union Theatre, not the one across the road now. And there was talk of a revival years ago with Jason Donovan, but it hasn't really happened. It's a great story. You know, it's a sort of a Walter Mitty dreamer sort of a story.
He escapes into fantasy a lot, am I right? He sort of lives this fantasy life.
He's brought up, I'm pretty sure it's a family of undertakers, and that's his mum and dad. And he goes upstairs and he escapes to this fantasy world.
Oh, wow, amazing. Did you feel like there was a big difference from going to the Haslets to going to Drury Lane? Because obviously Drury Lane is quite a special theatre.
Yes, it is. And I went actually with the Linton Youth Group. We were going to go and see No Sex, Please, We're British. And one of the parents complained. And so instead they took us to see Billy. So I didn't do that with the family. That was with the Linton Youth Group. I remember as a kid, when my parents say we're going to go to the cinema or we're going to go to the theatre, I couldn't remember which one was which. I knew it involved plush velvet seats and a curtain. I would say to him, is that the one with the people or the one with the film? And obviously honestly, Drury Lane was an amazing building as a kid. Also, when I was at Cornwallis School, I went to a secondary modern school, comprehensive school they used to call. I was in Miss Burkitt's class, and she was a music teacher, and she organised trips up to the Royal Opera House and ENO. So occasionally with my dad, after school, I would get on the coach and we'd go up, and I saw Geraint Evans do Figaro and Don Giovanni, and I saw Nureyev do Sleeping Beauty, I think it was. Unbelievable. As a kid who didn't really know the import of these people or anything, it was just another big plush building with velvet seats,
Yeah. I love how exposed you were to this artistic world as the son of two scientists and, mathematicians. And that's just wonderful that they didn't just keep you in their corridor. They opened doors for you. That's absolutely brilliant.
They were both only children. And I think and growing up in when they were born, 1930, 1932, growing up around that era, through the war, they didn't have these opportunities. And I think A, they wanted to have children who had siblings because they didn't have that. And B, they wanted us to experience all these things. And Dad was always very keen on classical music. And it sort of gave them lots of interest. I mean, my mum's still alive, and she always says the country she visited was really through me, because wherever I did a show, Mum and Dad would come and see it. If it was in Iceland, they came to Iceland. If it was in Singapore, they come to Singapore. And they suddenly started going to countries which they'd always wanted to go to, but which they now had a reason to go to, because George and I were there.
I have toured America because of you, which is clearly something that you do. Through you, people travel, which I love. I would never have done that if it wasn't for Mary Poppins. I'm not the sort of person to pack up my bags and go traveling for a year, but I did it because I had a job there, and I'm so pleased I did. It was a mind-blowing year and a wonderful experience. So, Ants, which musical were you first personally involved with?
That would be in a performing capacity at school. It was a musical my brother had written. So I was at Mason Grammar. I had to do this 2 years at comprehensive school, which I loved. I loved all my schooling. I loved primary school. I loved comprehensive. And at 13, I went to grammar, where my brother already was, because I was the first year who didn't have to do the 11 plus in Kent at that time. And at the grammar school, I didn't do so well in my A-levels. And so I asked Dr. Pettit, the headmaster, if I could stay on and redo the upper sixth. And he said, yes, you can. And in that year, my brother and his lyricist writing partner had written a musical, which my school, his old school, were going to put on. And I was desperate to be in this because I'd seen Nick, my brother, and Stephen Telfer, the lyricist, writing it. So I knew it. And I had to go and convince Trevor Webb, the music master, that I could play this role, because up to that point, I'd had tiny parts in Tom Sawyer, and I'd worked backstage on some weird things like N.F. Simpson's A Resounding Tinkle, La Pericole, I think it's Offenbach. I'd always worked out of the spotlight. But with this, because it was my brother's musical, I wanted to be in it. And so I got a part in it and loved doing it. And then I did do well enough in my A-levels so I could go to university. And I then tried to get that musical called Noble Sentiments by my brother put on at the Northcote Theatre. The local Exeter Musical Comedy Society in town said we only really do well-known titles. So it's at that point that I went to Stuart Trotter, who was the artistic director at the Northcote, said, would you let me have a week in the theatre to put on my brother's show? Having never directed or anything like that, I just had this burning urge to get this thing on. And the Student Guild said yes, because it was it was a financial risk for them, because I was doing it as a student society. But that was the first musical that I was personally involved with. It was one that my brother had written.
I love these leaps of faith that you take, and the go-get-em attitude of like, why not? Why not ask somebody if I can have a week in a theatre and do the show that my brother wrote? I'm also fascinated that your brother wrote musicals before you did.
Yeah.
So it's like it became a family job.
It was very unexpected that I was going to go down that path. I say because I was kind of the least musical. My brother did do a composers and performers course at the Royal College of Music, and he teamed up with this brilliant chemist, Stephen Telfer, who had a double first from Cambridge, and they wrote several musicals together. But what my brother didn't have is the very thing you just said you admired in me. He didn't have that get up and go to go out there and sell it. He sort of thought, if people want this show, they're going to come to me. And I just kind of knew it was not going to work like that. You need to bang your own drum a little bit louder. So that's what I was sort of trying to push him by getting his show seen by more people. And I fell into it. I fell into that. I thought, I can do this. I've now, I've become a patron of the Northcote Theatre, where that show took place, where I started in 1980. And I was also on the Northcote Theatre Liaison Committee, because Stuart Trotter wanted to try and get more students to use the theatre. And I was in the biology department, but I was the biology department's rep on the Northcote Theatre liaison committee, which meant in between dissecting a dogfish or a rabbit, I was trying to sell tickets to the next production that was coming up at the Northcote Theatre, and just letting the biology students and the zoology students know what's coming up.
I love that.
But it's really weird how it happened. And then when I was at university, I ended up directing Noble Sentiments. It made money. Stuart Trotter said, do you want another week next year? I said, yes, I do, because my brother's written another musical called Sour Grapes. I put that on, and George was in it. And that's how George and I really got to know one another.
Oh, wow.
And it was literally the day after it closed, we drove down to Plymouth to the Drum Theatre to see Sweeney Todd. And in that car journey back, which is like 40 minutes or something, we said, should we try and write a musical? And we were both coming up to graduation, and we both had places beyond graduation at St. Luke's Teacher Training College, because I was going to be a biology teacher and George was going to be a music teacher. So the next thing we did was cancelled our places at St. Luke's, or postponed them. We said, can we defer for a year? And then we went to the Northcote Theatre and we booked it. So we knew that the following March we had to have come up with something and produce it. Otherwise, we were going to have a bill for an empty theatre. And back then it was costing £2,750 a week to rent the theatre, which in 1982, 83 was a lot of money for a student. And then we had to do our degrees. So we sat our exams. As soon as they were over, we said, right, we need to decide what this show is going to be about.
And that was the Tutankhamun musical.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. I think that's fascinating, the tenacity and the sort of the go-getting, because I feel like that the same sort of on my side of the stage, where there are some people that I know are absolutely wonderful actors and singers. And I just think you can have all that, but if you don't have the courage or the oomph to apply for drama college or write to an agent or a casting director, then you can't not have that in this industry, because you just disappear, I think. And, you know, our careers are shaped by other people who have done the same as you, who have gone, I'm going to book that, I'm going to do this. And I've just seen Sweeney Todd, I'm going to write my own musical. That's absolutely brilliant. And I just massively appreciate the fact that you have done that, because it's created work and it's created joy for many, many people. Is there a musical that you have seen? Well, there's lots of musicals you've seen a lot because you've written them. But apart from the ones you've written, which musical have you seen the most? Are you a repeat viewer of?
I think it's probably Les Miserables, because I know I saw it 5 times when Patti LuPone was still in it. So I saw it originally with George at the Barbican in 1985, wasn't it? October 1985, I think, rings a bell. And we had just met Cameron McIntosh, so we just started having our relationship with him. And he was doing this show based on a novel I'd never heard of and didn't sound very jovial, called Les Miserables. Went to see it and absolutely loved it. And the minute the cast album came out, we bought it. And I know that I saw it 5 times with Colm Wilkinson and Patti LuPone and Michael Ball, although he was quite often wasn't on.
He had a hard time on it, didn't he, Michael? He's sort of something he's spoken about a lot is that he got quite panicky, I think, and was a bit exhausted from it. Yeah. How was that, watching it for the first time as something that the world had never seen before, you know?
It was amazing. And it was so clearly from the stable of Trevor Nunn and John Caird, because I was a big fan of The Life and Times of Nicholas Nickleby that the Royal Shakespeare Company had done. I'd seen it twice in its entirety, and it was 9 hours long. And you could go and spend a whole day either at Stratford or at the Aldwych, I think is where it came into. I saw it with Roger Rees originally, then I saw it with Michael Siberry playing Nicholas Nickleby, and Alan Armstrong was Wackford Squeers, and a lovely lady, Jane, can't quite get her name. She played...
Oh, the Bird Lady, Jane. Was she Bird Lady? And no, not Bird Lady, Mrs. Brill. Was she Mrs. Brill for you out in...
That's right.
On Broadway, wasn't she? Jane something, yeah.
So anyway, I loved that. And this was kind of like a musical that had that same sorts of sensibility to it, and with a great score. You know, songs like I Dreamed a Dream and God on High, just the power of the music. I loved it. So I saw that many times. This is 1985. George and I had already written Tutankhamun and Just So by now. But I then saw it when it transferred, and then I used to go and see it whenever a friend was in. So when, for instance, when Anthony Lynn, second cover Jean Valjean, went on, and it happened on one day in his entire staying with the show, he rang me, he'd done the matinee, he said, can you get here? And I got there, and so I saw him do it on the one day he did it. I saw Gemma do it. Whenever friends went in, I would go and see it. And it got to a point when Ben Ockrent, the late Mike Ockrent's 10-year-old son, was in as Gavroche. I went in to see Ben, and I thought, this is getting ridiculous now. You know, I'm going... every young Cosette. Now, subsequently, I've seen it lots of times whenever they have a big 25th anniversary or Cameron has a party, you know. Oh, I am a big fan of it. I'm a big fan of Claude Michel and Alain, actually. I love Miss Saigon too. I saw that many times. I saw several shows many times, not because I was thinking that is the best musical I've ever seen, which I'm not saying they're not, but because of my friendship, either with Cameron or with people on the sound desk. If I was ever in town of a night, I'd just pop in and watch Five Guys Named Mo again. Or I'd pop in, I'd sit in the box speakers and see Miss Saigon again. I saw that. I must have seen that dozens of times as well. All the while, Simon Bowman was in it because he was a friend of mine. Then Graham Bickley took over. Leia I'd met through the whole process of them casting her. So I saw a lot of those shows because they were on for a long time and I could just pop in when I wanted, you know.
That was my era growing up and wanting to be in musical theatre. That was Les Mis and Miss Saigon were what I listened to every night in my bedroom, what I performed in my bedroom every night. And they are the repeat attenders for me as well. And like you said, to begin with, you're watching it because you enjoy it and it's great. And then once you start getting to know people, then you're going to, I think the last time I saw Miss Saigon was because a friend of mine was playing Ellen and she was on for her understudy. And I remember, I love this story. I sat in a seat in the dress circle. I think it might be called the Royal Circle in Drury Lane. And it was quite a cold seat. And I was like, this is really weird. I felt like I'd wet myself or that it was damp. Also, it was really weird. And I spoke to Rachel, my friend, who was playing Ellen afterwards. And she said, oh, you were in Sarah Bernhardt's seat. And apparently there were two seats they would keep for Sarah Bernhardt, the ghost of Sarah Bernhardt, to sit in every night. And then I guess if people came late or wanted to see their friends, they were the sort of the emergency seats for people. And I was like, well, that would be why. I was sitting on a ghost. I was sitting in Sarah Bernhardt watching this show. But I don't know if I necessarily believe that, but it definitely felt like a cold chair to me.
How weird.
They were such seminal shows, weren't they? Miss Saigon and Les Mis, and Claude Michel and Alain have this, I wouldn't call it a stranglehold because that sounds kind of quite dramatic, but they really nailed what it takes to tell a story of epic proportions on a stage, that everything was big and everything had this spectacle. Whereas I feel we've lost that a little bit now. Everything seems, actually no, we haven't. I've just spent a year watching my husband in the Stranger Things play and that's massive. So I'm talking absolute nonsense. I'm going to shut up.
It's economics, of course, which is, Stranger Things was such a big hit that I think they all knew that worked. Hamilton, it came over, it had already worked. But nowadays, when you're writing a show, you sort of immediately think, oh, is this cast size too big? How can we make it smaller? Is this band going to be too big? How can we make it smaller? I was just recently asked to look at a show that had a one-night concert version, and it was done at Palladium. It was called At Last It's Summer.
Right.
And it was Larry Blank who was conducting a 35-piece orchestra. And I met the writer who'd written the book Music and Lyrics, and I said, the trouble is, no one is going to produce a show like this these days by an unknown writer, with all due respect, and an original story, which no one knows. There's nothing to hang it on. It's not necessarily even a star vehicle. They got a great cast, I have to say, for this concert, and it sounded beautiful. But I just said, I just can't really sink my teeth into it because I can't really see who's going to put something like this on nowadays.
Yeah, it's a big risk, isn't it, now? And if it did get put on, it might catch on. Some mass social media interest might be drummed up somehow, but you just can't bank on it. There's so much risk involved. And like you said, with your relationship with Cameron starting at those early days of Les Mis, because I've spoken to George, he was somebody who didn't take a risk on you, but took interest in you and wanted to nurture your careers, right? From the Vivian Ellis Award onwards.
Yeah, that's right. He did. And it was at a time when the Vivian Ellis Prize was 1985, April the 26th, 1985. And there was nothing else out there to showcase young writers' work. And there weren't many people writing, because at that point in the mid 80s, you'd really got Andrew and Tim, and you got Howard Goodall, who'd just written Hired Man with himself. He'd written it all. There was Stephen Oliver, who'd written Blondel with Tim, and that was kind of it. Everything else was, you go back as far as Lionel Bart, or further back, Ivan Novello, Vivian Ellis himself, Noel Coward, David Henniker. But in that sort of period between when Andrew and Tim suddenly reinvented musicals in a way, with Jesus Christ Superstar and Joseph, Evita was 79, 77, I think. There was no one else doing it. So there was no path to follow. So it wasn't what people thought, I know what I'm going to do when I grow up. I'm going to write musicals, because there was no blueprint. Even George said when he studied music at university, he said, I never dreamt I was going to make a career as a composer, even though I was studying music. It wasn't something people did. And when the Performing Rights Society decided to honour their patron, Vivian Ellis, who hadn't really had a hit since, I don't know when. I mean, there was a revival of Mr. Cinders with Dennis Lawson and who else was in it?
Wasn't Sian Phillips, was it? Was it Sian Phillips?
I wanted to say Sian Phillips, but that was Pal Joey.
Yeah.
This was at the King's Head, and then it came in. And they wanted to honour Vivian with this competition in his name. And it was a one-off. And all you had to submit was a synopsis and 2 songs. And at that point, we got a synopsis and 3 songs for Just So. So we chose what we thought were the 2 stronger of the 3. We typed it up. We were meticulous in the way we put our package together to deliver it. And we won it, surprisingly, because we weren't expecting to. And Charles Hart, who wrote the lyrics of Phantom of the Opera, was runner-up. And Tony Hawkes, the comedian, was another one of the 5 finalists. And it was presented at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama, directed by Martin Connor, with their students. And Alan J. Lerner was sitting behind us as we sat there in the audience. And the judges were Cameron, Andrew Lloyd Webber, Tim Rice, Mike Batt, Don Black, David Henniker, who wrote Half a Sixpence, Dan Crawford, who ran the King's Head, John Hosier, who was the principal at the Guildhall. And it was extraordinary that we won. But Cameron, while we were standing there to have the photograph taken, George may have told you this, but we were standing in the lineup and Cameron is next to George, and he leant forward to George and said, what are you going to do with it now, dear? And George turned to him and said, but what are you going to do with it? That was our meeting with Cameron. He was, I mean, at that point, he'd had a big success with Cats, and he had co-produced a lot of things, like the revival of Oklahoma that was at the Palace Theatre, and My Fair Lady with Tony Britton and Dame Anna Neagle in it. You know, we knew his name, like Robert Stigwood was one of the other ones around at that time who we knew the name above the title, but we'd never met him. And he wanted to get involved with helping us in our career. And I think he was 39 and we were 20, what we'd have been 24, 23, 24. Wow. And it was like having a father-son relationship in a way. He wanted to help us. He wanted to nurture us. And he started immediately, really, because that Christmas we did our very first production of Just So down at the Plymouth Barbican Theatre. And we needed some extra sound equipment. And we rang him up because he said, ring me if you need anything. So we did. And he gave us the money for the sound equipment. He's been in our lives ever since.
Yeah, that's wonderful that he did that. And I really hope that that continues. I know you guys are doing all these brilliant mentorship schemes and your own songwriting competitions as well. I'm intrigued to know, I didn't ask George, I'm intrigued to know which 2 songs were those competition songs.
They were There's No Harm in Asking, which was the first song we wrote for that show. We wrote that on January the 2nd, when we first sat down and said, right, this is our new show, 1985. And the second one was Just So, the title song.
Oh, brilliant.
And the third one didn't make it, but nor did it make it into the show. It was called Walk Tall, and it was a song for the giraffe.
I love it. Have you got all these ants? Have you got your kind of offcuts, as they say? You know, there's a few albums out there of like unsung Sondheim, like the Sondheim songs that never made it. Have you got those somewhere in a drawer?
It would be called Unbearable Styles and Drew. We have got all the recordings. Back in the day, it was cassettes. And then George was very proud when he bought this a recording machine that could record 4 tracks onto a cassette. So instead of you turning the cassette over and then recording on the other side, it recorded the whole width of the tape in 4 tracks. And that's what we did for our entry for the Vivian Ellis Prize, I think. It was recorded on this Tascam, I think it was called. I mean, I'm very not technically minded at all. That was always George's department. But he was thrilled with any of those sorts of his Korg synthesizer and all those bits and bobs. But yeah, we've got all the recordings somewhere.
I do think it's a lucky thing, isn't it? I think with composers, and especially sort of people who are musically gifted, it often goes hand in hand with being mathematically clever and technologically clever. And I think that's handy because the change in music production and writing and composition technologically has been so vast and so fast as well. You know, there's that fabulous Miss Saigon documentary of the making of Miss Saigon, which I could probably quote you line by line off by heart. There's a scene where they're rewriting the parts for the orchestra in one of the lobbies of Drury Lane, and they're all there doing it by hand. In my head, that feels like yesterday, whereas now it's just printed off, just do a little edit and off you go, run it off again. It's quite lucky that I feel like the composer side of things, they're able to keep up with that, whereas us kind of people who are more kind of lyrically, writery, sort of actory creative, I would be absolutely lost.
It's not my department. It's George, and George did learn it. He loved that sort of thing. You know, the next Yamaha keyboard that came out, he wanted it. The next Clavinova, when Sibelius, the software for writing out music, came available, he met the guys who invented it, and they used to help him very, very much in the early days. No, it's amazing. He loved all that sort of stuff. Whereas me, I like the paper and a pencil.
Yeah.
I don't use a dictionary, and I don't use a rhyming dictionary. I always think if I can't think of the rhyme, it's probably too complicated or too obscure that it wouldn't work for the character to sing it. But I do like pencil and paper. And then the next part of my journey is to type it. That's making some sort of a commitment when I actually put it onto the computer.
Oh, that's interesting. So having it in some kind of technical format makes it feel more further down the line for you. That's really interesting.
Yeah, it's the next stage for me. With a pencil and paper, despite the fact I've been writing for 42 years, I can't touch type. I'm still one finger, but with a pencil and paper, I can immediately change the word and cross it out. And I'm very quick writing. And I like to write almost as fast as I think when I'm in flow on a lyric. But then when I'm happy with it, I will type it into my laptop.
Oh, fabulous. So I'm imagining that risk that Cameron took, that massively paid off. Not risk, an interest, and, you know, this mentorship that he gave you guys. And I know you've had that from other people too, like at the Watermill and things like that. Is there, well, there will be. Which musical has made you laugh the most, and which musical has made you cry the most?
Cry the most might be Miss Saigon, because Leia Salonga used to get me every single time at the end. Laugh the most, I love Guys and Dolls. I love Little Shop of Horrors. Oh, Shucked. Some Like It Hot was really funny. I mean, that's what's sad, is going back to what we were talking about a minute ago, about the risk of putting on a musical. There you, with both Shucked and Some Like It Hot, the new Mark Shaman, Scott Whitman version, huge successes, huge numbers of Tony Awards, and both ran about a year. Yeah. Whereas 10 years ago, a hit like that, like when they had with Hairspray, you'd think that's got at least 5 years in it before they need to even worry about going out on tour.
They're both post-COVID as well, aren't they?
Yeah.
Which might also be a contributory factor to how short their runs have been. Mm-hmm. I'm very excited at that. Shucked.
It's Jack O'Brien, who's amazing. He can do a Tom Stoppard. Hairspray is his and Shucked is his. And it's done with a lightness of touch and a humour that you can't invent that. Those sort of brilliant comedic directors are hard to find. And he's a great guy.
It's quite unusual for Broadway, isn't it? I remember some of the Americans telling me that in Broadway, there's quite a big delineation between a musical theatre director and a straight theatre director, which we don't really have over here. They do everything. Whereas in America, you kind of tend to do one or the other. But Jack O'Brien has been one of those who has successfully managed both of them, which is fabulous.
I think to have the brain of a Hal Prince or a Jack O'Brien or a Mike Ockran or a Trevor Nunn and put them with a good musical stager is gold dust, because you've then got the intellect for the storytelling and the motivation behind the character. And you've got the musical stager to actually make the numbers work and build the numbers. I mean, Stephen Mear is amazing like that. He's brilliant at knowing how to build a number on stage. He's also great at how to talk to the lighting designer as to how to build the number on stage, which is another skill that isn't necessarily I can light a show, but they've never lit a musical before. It's a different skill set. I mustn't leave out the producers. The producers used to make me howl. I saw that first on Broadway with Nathan Lane, and then I saw it when it came into the UK.
I haven't seen the new production. Have you yet? I know it's transferring to the Garrick, the one that's been at the Chocolate Factory. I haven't seen that yet. Have you?
No, I haven't. I moved out of London in October of last year. So I used to live next to Tower Bridge. I was near the Union. I was near the Menier. I was near Wilton's. I was near the Unicorn, Southwark Playhouse. It was a wonderful place to be, to see these things trying out. It's like I saw Curious Case of Benjamin Button when it was at the Elephant at Southwark. I was saying earlier I saw Billy when it was at the Union. And I've just had a show on at the Unicorn. It was such a perfect place, but I just felt like the time was right to split my time between Kent and France. I didn't need a third boiler to worry about going wrong.
You get clean air there, which is great.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's even going to be an answer to this next question. This is my I've never seen a professional production of West Side Story question, because I do regret that and I will remedy it one day. Is there a musical out there you regret that you haven't seen or you didn't see?
I didn't see Why Am I So Single? I regret that.
No, I didn't either. I feel quite bad about that.
What often happens in me is I get invited to an opening night, and if I'm not around and I don't go, I then don't get off my arse to go and see it. And Why Am I So Single? I was down here in France and I never got to see it. And I'm a big fan of Six, and I love what Toby and Lucy do, because it's something that George and I never could do somehow. They're so young and hip. It kind of it kind of pains me to say, it makes me feel comfortable being with them. But I didn't see it. And I just texted George yesterday to say congratulations on the nomination for it. But I regret I didn't see it, because I sort of wish I had, so I could have had a conversation about it with George, because I don't really know anything about it. But I missed the workshop. I missed when they opened, and then it wasn't on for as long as they hoped it would be. So I was not around.
That's the thing, isn't it? We make plans down the line. Oh, we'll see it at some point, and then you don't expect things to finish as quickly as they do, which is such a great shame.
I didn't see at Drury Lane Laura Michelle Kelly in a very big Hobbitty sort of show. What's that called?
The Lord of the Rings. I think, can we change the name of it to that? A very big Hobbity sort of show. It would be a far better title.
That sort of story is not really my thing. I've watched the first film, I think, of Lord of the Rings. I always get mixed up with Lord of the Flies. That's why I'm nervous to say it. The writer of Lord of the Flies was an old boy from my grammar school.
Wow.
When I was 10, my teacher at Cox Heath Primary School read us The Hobbit, and I absolutely loved it. But not Lord of the Rings. That was something different. But The Hobbit was its own book, and I loved it. But as I've grown older, I'm not really into those sort of sci-fi things. Even Stranger Things. I did watch the first season on TV when they have this upside down world or something. They go through some sort of vortex, don't they? And
yes. The Upside Down.
Oh, it is called The Upside Down. Oh, good. With Stranger Things, the first season I got that the mother wanted the son to come back from the other side and that stuff. I then watched the second season. They sort of seemed, everyone can go to the other side. And I just thought, oh, you lost me now. It's like Squid Games. All my young nieces and nephews and things, they rave about all these things. And I just know inherently they're not my thing. I'm much more a crime series, Unforgotten. I love Unforgotten with Nicola Walker.
There's a documentary now on iPlayer called The Real Unforgotten. It's a 2-part documentary about a cold case crime from 1981.
Wow.
It's a big, massive BBC documentary. So that's really interesting. If you like Unforgotten, this is like The Real Unforgotten.
Yeah, I like those sort of series. And, I've become a bit of a tart for a box set, or a binge watch a series. I don't like to wait a week to see the next episode. I like to be able to sit down and say, okay, I'm going to watch 3 episodes of Yellowstone this afternoon, and then I'll watch another 3 tomorrow. And you just get absolutely hooked and sucked into that world.
But I also think it's something to do with what we were talking about earlier, Ants, in that your work and your interest is so much based in our world, like the birds and the bees and the trees and real truth. Fantasy is a very different genre, and that's not your thing, is it? That's not what you do.
But no, as a kid, I used to love Doctor Who, and I loved Star Trek when that first appeared on our screens. But as I got older, and when John Pertwee changed into a different Doctor, I did like Tom Baker, but I was brought up on the first William Hartnell. Was he? Yeah, that was his name. William Hartnell, then Patrick Troughton, John Pertwee. And it was a big, big thing in our lives when the Doctor changed, when the Doctor morphed into somebody else, because you got so used to him. And I did love John Pertwee as a Doctor. I met him once, actually. I met John Pertwee at the Watermill Theatre.
Wow.
I think that might be the only Doctor I've met. Probably is the only Doctor I've met.
I've not met David Tennant, but I did Chitty Chitty Bang Bang with Sandra Dickinson. So I feel like I've got a connection to David Tennant. That's something they've never done, is it? Doctor Who, the musical. I bet that's not far off somewhere.
Oh, talk to Sonia. She'll probably work on it.
Oh, sure. Okay. And let's have a little break and... So big thanks to Ants for his first half of his podcast. We love chatting, as you can probably tell. So I have decided to split this podcast into 2. So next week you can tune in for the second part of Anthony Drewe talking musicals to me. I haven't really left it on a cliffhanger, but you know the kind of questions that are going to come up in the second part. So tune in again next week. And in the meantime, thank you so much for listening today. This has been Talk Musicals to Me for the Bloop Network. My fabulous producer is Aaron Ware, and the music you heard is from the pen of the sublime Tom Self. If you get a moment, please subscribe or follow and rate the podcast by clicking the stars below on the podcast page. It takes about 2 seconds to do, and it will really help the podcast and its future life, and would make us massively, eternally, enormously grateful. In the meantime, another huge thanks for tuning in, and please do so again next time to see who will be next up to talk musicals to me.